Oh, I got the countdown. It's starting. It looks like I decided to just log in here a few minutes early because I had a webinar that I did where I was talking for approximately 5 minutes. And pretty soon someone throws up in the chat box, am I the only one having audio struggles? No one could hear me. So I would love for whenever somebody gets on, I'm even going to type it in the chat box, to let me know that you can hear me. Oh, yay, Amy Walter, you can hear me. Okay, awesome. I'm glad. All right, so I'm assuming if you can hear me, then everyone can hear me because it obviously wasn't working. And the cool thing I thought of so great that I got this microphone to plug in, and my computer told me it was working, but clearly it wasn't. And so 5 minutes in is a little painful for me to be talking and for nobody to hear. It is so great when it works. Man, I didn't get the technology brain. I really didn't. I've got brothers who do computer software and two parents that are engineers, but it's not for me. Thankfully, I have a lot of people who can help me with technology for the most part. But today I'm at home. Right. Oh, yes, I know, because you're in Iowa. That's right. That's so fun. I'm glad you're on and enjoying them. Well, I hope you're enjoying them. This is probably like your third one, isn't it? My gosh, that's awesome that you're on here. Learning lots. Good. I'm so glad. We love doing these, well, I should say, I love doing these webinars to give parents, teachers, other people different ways to think about things, but then also just to help parents understand a little bit deeper about what might be going on. We often talk about, we don't really appreciate some sort of behavior in our child and we want to change that behavior without really figuring out why it's there in the first place. And we know that input equals output. If you've learned that in some of my previous webinars, that's really what we look at in our office as well, in the nervous system and in the brain. So I am going to talk about teen anxiety. I interviewed some teens to just even talk to them about teen anxiety because we know how important social life is for teens. We definitely start to get a little bit disproportional at times, and this is probably very subjective per family, but we get really out of balance with our teens in the amount of peer time, because peers are considered people with the same amount of life experience as them compared to time that they do spend with families. And it can get really unproportional, and it's hard to learn things about life from someone who has experienced the same amount of life as you. So it's important as parents to obviously be the lead in our child's life, really be the guide, not the protector. We're going to talk about that. That's there for them. And COVID probably has turned some things around for some families. And guessing, there was more time indoors, but then also probably cut out a lot of social time. And that did one of two things. It made them go after other things to do with physical activity, or maybe turn to screens and different outlets for them. And one of the things that they had told me is if they can't find their escape, like we don't let them go to whatever escape that might be. And unfortunately, social media and online webinars. Hello, hi, Paige. I'm a teen anxiety. I am teen anxiety. Yes, right. There's just so much that we can really sit down and learn about ourselves also, as adults, and what's going on with our teens. But if our teens are just stuck with the screen, those electronics can be a really unhealthy escape, and you really never know what's going to pop up. Quite honestly, my son just the other day in the thunderstorm was watching a basketball game. It's all about basketball, and he was like, the comment in there said, something about the rapture and and all this stuff that was totally startled him. And then the house shook with thunder, and he was like, ah! And he was like, oh, take my phone, I don't even want to be on it, because we do have in our rule, or in our house, not a rule, but an agreement really, to charge your phone in this very office where you're at right now, and not to be on it, especially before bedtime, because that'll just turn your brain on. 45 minutes before bed, the screen should be turned off. But really, when you're looking at what anxiety is, I loved the description that someone gave me, that it's excitement without breath. Like, it's a very internalized stress. If you Google, what is anxiety, it's all about, intense, just over the top stress about everyday life. So fear of really the unknown. A lot of fears are known, like what you're fearful of. Perhaps snakes. I have a lot of snakes around my property. People are pretty fearful of snakes, and there can be, of course, phobias. But anxiety is something that you fear the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen from day to day to day. And what we found is, bless our hearts as parents, we will often try to rescue our kids and not let them experience whatever it is, whatever emotion that it is that they're feeling. And instead of talking to them about, here's this emotion, what's going on inside of your brain, we want to tell them how they should or shouldn't feel. Well, you shouldn't feel that way. You should be fine. You should be this. And instead, we're stealing coping skills and emotional strength from them for their future. And really, emotional strength and mental stability, it's just like another muscle inside the body. It's got to be worked. It does have to experience stress. Now, I wouldn't encourage you just to purposely stress your child, right? Like, to purposely trigger them in some sort of way. But I would encourage you to let them have that feeling, whatever that feeling might be. And you might think it's completely inappropriate, right? You're like, oh, okay, buddy. But there's times, even as a parent, if you just don't slow down and get down to the heart of it, it can just be a little bit annoying. And just even today, I was leaving to the office to see my patients, and my 6-year-old was crying, very upset with my 10-year-old. And he was like, he's helping me pick weeds. And I'm thinking, like, what a terrible brother, like helping you pick weeds. Okay, in my brain. And instead I'm like, oh, okay, buddy, so, tell me why you're upset about this. And he said, it's because I never get to do a job to earn money. Dad said I could earn money picking weeds, and I never get to do a job without someone's help helping me earn the money. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's obviously totally valid, and especially in a 6-year-old mind. To him, Landon, my 10-year-old, was taking money from him instead of like contributing and maybe earning his own. But it's hard for them to think through that. And often when you want to be like, oh my gosh, really, dude, you're pissed about that, like, get over it. But you just got to get down to it and then acknowledge how they're feeling. And often there's times we just kind of want to rescue from them or tell them how they shouldn't feel. And we've got a couple different parenting camps that we live in. And some of us, of course, fluctuate amongst the three of them. But other times we just pick a camp and stay in it. And it's typically either exactly what your parents did, or maybe some of that, or just rebel from that. So there's parents that are very authoritarian. If any of you guys have done the positive discipline classes or taking those courses or read those books, this kind of started me on my journey with positive discipline and helping build independent kids, which is not necessarily something that I was raised with, but there are parents that are very authoritarian, and that is the parent that, like, you shouldn't feel that way, I'm going to tell you what to do, and those are the kids that are kind of looking over their shoulder, like, searching for their parents in the audience for approval in whatever it is, from a band concert to a basketball game. They're the kind of eyeballing there, what's dad going to say, oh gosh, my mom's going to yell. And it becomes this people pleasing and this high expectation and wanting to make sure you get approval from other people. And it really builds that child to feel often like they have to reach whatever maybe label or whatever you've told them to do. And it's hard when they're left alone for them to manage those feelings. So it starts to get internalized in more of a stress response. We also have parents that are very permissive. So it's like, I don't want to rattle the cage. I don't want to step on any toes. I'm going to let my kid do whatever they want to do. I know they're going to be really upset if we put boundaries on phones or friends or bedtime or food, whatever it is. And they just kind of, let the kid run the show. And then that teen, or even a tween, or how, it could be a freaking 2-year-old for all I know, they start to have the hierarchy. And they start to be the ones that are in control, and really in their heart, they know that they're not, like, they don't they want boundaries. Kids really want boundaries. They want to feel like, here's our agreements and here's where I can play within this zone and feel really comfortable. And often it's both of those parenting camps are really based typically on our emotions. So I don't want to stir up feelings in myself that make me feel anxious. So I don't want my kid to do that. And I understand that is hard. Like as a comfortability level as a parent, I grew up with a very worried parent. That's kind of hard. We're like, oh, this could go wrong, you know? And so just to be able to take my fears aside, take my anxieties aside, take my stress aside and make sure that I'm projecting onto them that they're confident and capable. And that's part of being a proactive parent, which is that middle parent that this is like, man, you know, this early on can be really difficult. The long-term game and gain is really where it's at, because you're helping them develop these skills. You're helping them deal with the emotional components of what they might be feeling. You're trying not to rescue them and allow them to process whatever is going on and not feel like they always have to be happy. Because I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. I'm typically a very positive, happy person, but it doesn't mean that there's not other emotions that are validated and seen that you can have, and that there's something wrong with you, possibly, if you aren't always happy. So there's like a time where we just want to rescue our kids, cheer them up, make sure they're feeling better. You're like, what's going on? It's good, you know? And instead of wanting to just literally listen, instead of try to fix, which I'm sure this is exactly a marriage conversation too, right? You're like, I just got a dump. I don't want you to fix it. I don't want your advice. I just need to tell you what's going on. And that can often be with teens, tweens, you know, they want to tell you, and it often isn't, Mom, I need to talk to you about this, right? You need to be able to set aside time and boundaries for your kids to be able to come to you and have a conversation, and to not rescue them all the time either from those emotions, to be able to listen, not rescue them from homework, not be their 100% Uber driver, which is hard for me right now with kids going to different events and practices, to let them work things out on their own, to problem solve, to be okay with being uncomfortable. We're so in the tech world with like texting, I don't have to look someone in the eyes anymore to ask them a favor or say thank you when you do get that favor, when someone does drive you to a sports practice or whatever happens. It becomes so overlooked. And those small things really seriously matter. And then of course, right now, it seems to be gotten better, at least in Idaho. But with people walking around like this, right? You can just see their eyes, but you can't see the rest of the facial expressions. And that also is a very unknown fear. You don't know how they're feeling. Subconsciously can be extremely difficult. So what we want to be able to do with our teens is build the resilience, build the adaptability, give them that mental strength that they need, and then pull away what feeds it. And really what can feed it is lack of sleep, lack of exercise, lack of a real proper schedule. And that can be overscheduling or underscheduling, although I do believe that a lot of our kids don't have their own free time to be able to be creative and use their imagination and their mind. Instead, you know, we need to be stimulated by picking up a screen or watching a screen. And to teach them how to relax when they are feeling stressed, to allow them to have an outlet. So one of the teens had said, I don't feel like I have an escape, or I'm not allowed to go there because it becomes a punishment. So, and for my son, when we were talking about this, I said, tell me what I need to know about teens, what stresses you out, what makes you anxious. And he said, right now, FOMO, which is fear of missing out. P.S. I don't know if everybody knows that little acronym. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you know, normally I'd be able to I have all these social interactions with my friends, and right now I can't. And I don't know, you know, like maybe someone's going to someone else's house and I'm missing out on that, or someone's doing this. And it's just, you know, you don't know what's closed and what's open, and the rules are so off. And I totally get that. And I remember being a teen and needing that social interaction with friends, and that FOMO can be a pretty big deal. And of course, peer pressure can be good or bad, right? If you're hanging around kids that have the same expectations as you, then it can be great. If you have ones with different expectations and values, it can be not so great. And that was one other thing that the teen said, is being around people without the same standards, which I thought was a really good way to describe it. that they've got, different standards, and maybe this is comfortable for them, whether it's something like drugs, alcohol, vaping, things like that are big right now in middle schools and high schools, or if it's something of just even the way that they're talking and treating another person, it can be that uncomfortable for them. So to be able for them to speak up or decide that's not the energy they want to be around, great. Let them decide that on their own and without us trying to, be the scapegoats for them. Sometimes they don't know their triggers, they said, but they'll start to feel the angst in either their chest or their stomach. Fear of death is a big one, that they hadn't accomplished something. And often I've seen, it seems to be, not always, that a lot of the kids that come into my office that have struggled with some sort of anxiety, or they're more of an anxious kid, they're more type A. They actually have their own high demands and expectations of themselves. It's not even the parent that's putting it on them. So letting them know what's realistic, helping them set boundaries of whether it's, managing time or homework, or what are your goals? Do you have a direction that you're going with this? Or is this just, racing around the track, which is how another kid described it. It's like going around trying to get ahead of everyone else, but not understanding the direction. And you've all seen race car tracks just going in circles and circles, trying to win, but you're not really going anywhere. At some point you cross the finish line, but there's no actual place you're going. And that was anxiety to them. Some kids said that they don't have the emotional skills. They don't know if they've been allowed to feel those feelings. They're feeling like their parents protect them and are helicopter parents instead of letting them experience life. Not enough sleep, not enough physical activity, a lack of feeling accomplished, and grades. And a lot of what we look at in the office, and I've got my notes, so sorry I'm looking down and looking at what I have on here. I wanted to do this just the picture of me, which I did my sports webinar with as well, instead of all the slides, although I do a lot of webinars with slides so parents can see and take notes. And I hope if you want to take notes, I hope you're taking notes and things to bring back to your child, and ways and just little outlets that you can bring to them, ideas and conversations you can have with them. If you saw one of our previous posts that we had posted up, it was, questions I wish my parents would have asked me. And there's some pretty serious questions in there, but even some of like, where do you feel the most safe? And some kids, they might want to tell you that they don't feel safe at somebody else's home, but it's their friend and they get to be sent there and it's exciting. Like you think like, oh, you get to go to Buddy's house. Maybe they don't feel safe at Buddy's house. And maybe they don't want to tell you that because they don't want to hurt Buddy's feelings. They still want to be Buddy's friend, but maybe Buddy's parents are not, emotionally sound or healthy either. And they're going to pick up on that. There also was that they're unknowing of other people's triggers and feeling like they don't know their stress points and that they might trip someone else's trigger. So when you're looking at stress, when you're looking at what's going on inside the body and where we as chiropractors really fit into this conversation. I feel like I get to fit into it as a parent. I'm obviously not a psychologist. I'm not some sort of emotional expert by any means. It's been 14 years of working with my children and now in the office with other kids and helping their bodies be able to process stress, which is what we're all about in our office as chiropractors. We're talking about that adaptability. We're talking about the resilience, and to tell people it's not that stress is never going to come into your life. It's not like you're going to be able to completely avoid it. There's no stress, there's no death just because you're under chiropractic care and your nervous system's calm. That's not the case at all. It's that you have adaptability to that stress, that you don't keep that stress, internalize that stress, harbor that stress, and have this snowballing effect, which is typically what anxiety turns into, is a self-perpetuating cycle. And sometimes it's that lack of sleep that will perpetuate the cycle, lack of nutrition, where we think kids are just so, oh my gosh, I wish I could eat 15 cookies and still look that good. Yeah, but they don't feel good, right? That's their fuel, is what they're eating and putting inside of their body. They don't feel good internally, even though they might look good from the outside perspective. And typically that's just a body frame that you're looking at, not necessarily internally what's happening to them. And what we see is kids that have that fight or flight response triggered. And what you have to remember with teenagers, we're having kids hitting puberty and menstruating at age 9. We might have even had an 8-year-old in our office. Honestly, it's pretty young these days. And puberty starts hitting a little bit earlier and earlier. And I remember, when I was like 12, I think I was in 6th grade when I had my menstrual cycle. It's still kind of average for some kids, but there's some kids that are either getting it super early, 8, 9, 10, or way late, because their body can't handle the stress that's there. So, and they have a hard time maintaining the hormone levels. So the other thing we have to remember is that hormones are also going inside these teens. There's ebbs and flows of hormones that they had never experienced before. It brings up emotion. Any of us that can think about hormones pump through our body, women in general, or specifically, you can watch yourself kind of ebb and flow often during cycles, and with hormone fluxes, of course, we want those stable and us to feel stable, right? It's not fun if someone can totally trigger you, which I used to be, or identify you as saying, oh man, okay, I must be a little, pre-PMS-y. And I'm grateful not to have that anymore, because I'm sure so is everyone around me. And honestly, if I was a teen and my mom was listening to this, she'd be like, I wish I would have known about chiropractic care when you were a teenager, because you were miserable. And I really was. I was so grumpy. And it's just been a total world of a difference. But what's happening is their brains aren't fully developed either. They are working on this. I mean, so many neurological firings are happening, and nerves that fire together, wire together, right? Our body learns this. They learn things over time, just like learning a drill on the basketball court or writing your name. Neurologically, that pathway has to be put in there. And what we don't want is a neurological pathway for stress. We don't want to open those gates constantly. We don't want to constantly feel stressed and angst and keep that internal energy that's there. So many of you've heard me talk about the fight or flight response, which anxiety tends to just perpetuate that cycle. And you never have a tight lid. So many of you have seen this analogy I do often, where we talk about flipping your lid. This is that fight or flight response. And here's what happens is there's a stress response. Something triggers your stress, whether it's unknown stress, because you maybe don't have the skills to deal with whatever's happening in front of you, or it's a known stress. I see a bear. That fight or flight response gets triggered. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, all of your senses get turned way up. And this is where we bring in a sensory conversation with people who are like, oh, I'm just on edge all the time. Your senses, like my eyes, or maybe you're blinking all the time, the ears, like the volume's turned up, your heart rate's turned up, tactile responses is been altered, because everything is preparing for that fight or flight response, to run from a bear or whatever unknown fear is happening in whatever situation at that moment. And anxiety tends to be the everyday life experiences, whether it's social anxiety or separation anxiety, generalized just anxiety of unknown. That's going to trigger that response. And unfortunately, the blood, or fortunately, I guess, for people that want to fight, right, it gets shunted from the vital internal organs that are resting, healing, digesting, out to the limbs to fight or flee. And that's great if you got to run from that bear, you got to take that test, you're going to play in that soccer game, whatever it is that you want those hormones pumping through, adrenaline, cortisol, you just want to go, and then shut it back down when it's over. Be able to not be reactive and impulsive, which is your hindbrain when your lid is flipped, but instead in control, creative, rational, organized. What this lid does, this prefrontal cortex does, is keeps your fight or flight response. It inhibits, calms, relaxes, keeps the lid on tighter from that fight or flight response. And unfortunately, anxiety, you can kind of live here, right? Just one more thing, just trigger it. And the kids and adults that are suffering with that fight or flight response that's constantly triggered, often in young kids, this is a sensory issue that's going on, and in teens it becomes more of an anxiety. And when we start to get into more of the depression conversation, it can look similar to anxiety, but these are kids that are literally like fatigued and tired and have thoughts of self-harm and don't have worthiness. I mean, it gets a little bit deeper when we get into that conversation, but that's kind of the path. And they become exhausted and they are hard to deal with. They have often miss out on sleep, because when you're stuck in fight or flight, your brain's just going, it doesn't want to turn off. That parasympathetic, those internal organs and glands don't get the nutrients that they need. The heart doesn't calm itself. The breath is really short. I can even feel myself doing it right now when I'm talking. Like the breath is here. It's very anxious instead of a nice calming breath, which is helpful to be able to provide that calming response. But I also know that there's anxiety that people have a struggle just even thinking about breath and breathing, and that's not going to work. So they are going to need whatever outlet it is for stress. So when that stress response is there, there's energy that's just built up inside the body. That's the excitement without breath. It's inside of them. They need to be able to get it out. We need to be able to allow them to experience it. They need to be able to go, whatever it is that they have to do. I know for my son is basketball. He's like, I need an outlet. I need to feel like I've accomplished something. I need to go outside and play. I need a physical outlet for the energy that I have right now, or I don't sleep well at night. Well, when you don't sleep well at night, you don't heal well. You don't feel well. You wake up tired. You're still missed out. So sleeping is that parasympathetic response. That's where you should be while you're sleeping, healing and repairing from the stress of the day, learning about the day. Our body actually goes through our day at about a quarter of the rate. It's just absolutely wild. If you've ever read books like Why We Sleep, and some of what they look at the brain, what's occurring at night, you're actually relearning what had happened. Well, if you're missing out on sleep, you're missing out on learning. And that can be social experience, that can be stress resilience, that can be just developing organs and glands, growth, just repair in general. You can be a very weaker individual because your body's growing so rapidly in height, but it can't keep up muscularly and the brain can't organize itself. So the coolest thing that we found with our chiropractic research is that every adjustment stimulates that prefrontal cortex, and that'll not only does it help the body communicate better, but it also keeps that lid on tighter for that fight or flight response not to be triggered so easily. So every adjustment is going to work to help keep that lid on a little bit tighter and keep the kids relaxed. And then we talk about not feeding it. So what feeds that stress response, all the things that I mentioned, what chiropractors call the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So when you're looking at toxins in particular, it is what we're putting inside of our body for fuel. You might have trying to fully neurologically connect your body, but you're feeding it garbage. So you're getting garbage back to the brain for it to work with. And over time, it starts to wear down on those tissues. You don't get the nice healing and repairing response that you want to. So you need to make sure that their diet reflects their energy, reflects what they want to be able to achieve, reflects their mental stability. What they put inside of their body really matters. Nutrient-dense materials matter. Using things like supplementation and essential oils are really going to matter for somebody that wants to build and grow a healthy system. Every single cell, organ, and tissue in your body needs to be fed well, needs to be communicated well with your brain. And that's our ultimate goal in our office. And then to also, like I'm saying, not trigger these responses, give these kids outlets for their stress. Part of trauma, when we look at that, part of those 3 T's is actually not moving their body enough, more than it is moving their body too much. Now, you can have the super athlete that doesn't get enough recovery and is way overscheduled and way tired and using their body and running it down. Yes, you can get that. But the kid that's sitting in front of a screen, not moving their body, their brain is not getting the movement that it needs. It's not getting the fuel that it needs. It runs off of electrical activity. 60% of that comes from those spinal muscles. Those need to be working well. Those need to be moving well. It's what we assess in the office, but also what they need to do with their bodies. They've got to move their core. They can't just sit around and just twiddle their thumbs and expect their brain to be healthy. It just doesn't work that way. So really getting them out and getting physical is going to be a huge step in the right direction. Hopefully get an outlet for the stress so it's not bottled up at night and they can't get enough sleep. They can turn that fight or flight response off, get their lid on, rest and heal and repair from the day. And the thought process of poor mental capacity, poor mental self-image is also something that needs to be addressed with teens. Now, I'm a mom of teen boys, and I have all boys. There's still body image issues. Hunter still wishes he was taller and he gets a complex about that. My 10-year-old thinks that because he compares his physical stature to his brother who works out constantly, that he is not fit. And we just, the things that we can tell ourselves, and if we don't address those young and talk about positive self-talk, that thought cycle is just going to continue to trigger and trigger and trigger. And of course, as parents, we've got to do our own work, right? We've got to be the example, not the do as I say, not as I do example. You're not going to come home from work, eat a bag of chips, sit on the couch, and be like, oh, I deserved it. It was a long day at work. Oh, geez. What do you think your teen or your child's going to do? Sit on the couch, sit on a screen, and eat whatever crap is in front of them too, because they feel the same way. you're like, oh man, I've deserved it. I had a long day of school. Obviously now it's not a lot of school. I've had a long sports practice. I've had a long whatever it was. I deserve this. And instead, we need to be showing them a healthy example of what we're eating, how we're moving our bodies, how we're managing our emotional stress, and opening up the conversation with them. That there's always there's always an open door conversation, and telling them the truth from when they're young. If you're on here for teenagers, you're probably thinking, oh, maybe I missed that window. But if you're on for even younger kids, to have that constant truthful conversation about what's going on is really helpful for them to build up not only trust between you and them, they can come to you and get answers instead of going to friends for answers for things, which they are going to get answers from their friends in their opinion, and who knows what they heard, probably online. And be able to say, I'm going to give you the truth, how you ask it. Of course, you're going to want to give it an age appropriate, response to that. But to be sure that you're not sugarcoating things, you're not, trying to just, oh, let's not talk about that yet, making sure you keep that conversation flowing for them so they do have an emotional connection with you, that they do feel safe coming to you, but they also don't feel rescued coming from you. They also know that you're not going to be the fix-it parent. You're not going to be you shouldn't be feeling that way parent, and tell them what to do and how to feel. Let them be themselves. And we really didn't even get into this conversation about some peer pressure and relationships and things like that. But those can also, of course, feed those 3 T's, and that's going to feed the stress response, and that's going to make it harder to heal and repair. So really sitting down and talking to your kid about what they're eating, how they're sleeping, what their schedule looks like, are all things that are going to help and truly help. And if you're a parent that's on here who has never had their kids' nervous system evaluated, that's what we do in our office. We want to measure that fight or flight response. We want to measure how the organs and glands are being affected. We want to look at how stressed the brain is feeling. And we run all 3 of those scans in our office to measure it, monitor it, keep it down, keep it low, have these kind of conversations, do these webinars for parents and teens to be able to understand, that's what's going on, and this is how I could find a solution. Because there's many people that come to our office, they're like, I can't get my kid out of this funk, they're so stressed, they're explosive. And we run a neurological scan and we say, oh my gosh, here's all the stress that's just been accumulated inside their body, inside of their brains and their nervous system. Let's clear that out and let's see what's underneath all of those layers, right? And it's usually a more calm, more connected version of them, and a child that can manage themselves really, really well, instead of a child who continues to be stressful, be fearful of everything that's going on around them. And it's so rewarding to see it. It's rewarding to see those kids thrive. It's rewarding to talk to them, especially when they feel open enough to have conversations, when they can answer these sorts of questions to you and say, this is what it looks like or feels like or was or is for them. And knowing that they do have the power to self-heal, to self-regulate, to be healthy. That's truly how the body was designed. It's not designed to be stressed. It's not designed to be fatigued and angry and depressed. It is literally designed to thrive, and we've got to find a way to get it that way and to keep it that way and to let them live their life that way. That's really where you watch that potential just explode on the kids. And what was cool, I was talking to Hunter, once again, my 14-year-old, about this and about some emotional triggers. And we were looking at some stuff of other teens and what they were saying, and some of the older teens that are having relationships right now. And I asked, when is it an appropriate age, you think, but to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend? And he looked at me and said, when you find yourself first, because otherwise you're going to be looking for outside validation from someone else. And I was like, oh. Wow, that was a very mature, bold, thoughtful answer. Okay, I mean, who raised you, right? How amazing is that they can figure that out and just look at themselves and realize that if they are seeking external validation, that they're not going to find themselves in who they are. And of course, there's some people that just never would get married, right? I'm sure that would have been the case for me. I didn't know who I was when I got married, but what a great life and world we'd live in if we decided to do that, find ourselves first before we attach ourselves to someone else and project what we think that person should be on them when they haven't truly found themselves. So just advice from a 14-year-old, thought I'd leave you with that. But also, if you are watching this and you know someone that needs to hear this information, their kid needs a scan, please contact us. Let them know they watched this webinar. We've got VIP pricing for them to be able to come in and sit down, talk to a doctor, get a neurological scan, and get a plan to get them a healthier life. So thank you guys for watching. I'm going to stick around just for a few minutes. I went a couple minutes over at 7:02, but I just want to be here in case there is any questions you want to pop up in the chat. I'll stay on here for a few minutes, and if there's not, great. I'll see many of you in the office, and you can address any of your concerns to us directly to the doctors. We all have a really great emotional conversation with people. Dr. Stromer's really awesome at it as well. And you can catch the little piece on our Purpose-Driven Chiropractic Connection community page. If you guys are patients in the office and you haven't searched that page out, PDC Connection page, make sure you're on that as well, because we're bringing that back and going to have some exclusive Purpose-Driven Chiropractic patient webinars and some fun events coming up. Mark your calendar for August. Oh boy. I don't want to say the wrong date, but it's the first Friday in August. So August 7th for our patient appreciation day, which was really super fun last year. Okay, well, you guys, thank you for getting on here and share this, as I said, with anyone who needs to hear this conversation and needs to know how they can help their teen better, how they can have their nervous system evaluated, which is our bread and butter. And then, of course, other people who are like, okay, what you're saying makes sense. Yeah, there's a replay, Amy. And what you're saying makes sense. I want to do my own research, or we're at this point of, my child sounds like they're anxious and depressed. We need other help. Absolutely. There's people that do this for a living and they're fantastic at it. I happen to be a mom that's a chiropractor that knows about the nervous system and sees a stress response, and I'm willing to listen to people and willing to give advice on what to pay attention to, how to maybe approach things, and make some really positive changes in your family. So there should be a replay link that comes in your email. If not, it is, if you registered for this, I'm pretty sure the replay link, I think it's the next email that comes out. So you're going to see it right in there. Then you can share with anybody who needs to hear it, or if you want to listen to it again. Sometimes I talk really fast. Thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy your Tuesday. I didn't do this on a Thursday because it's my husband's birthday on Thursday. So we're going to go celebrate him on June 11th. I'll talk to you guys soon.